And we are performing the audience. We are performing the audience.
Andy, this is Anya.
And nice to meet you.
And this is Barry.
I really enjoyed it.
So Anya is Anya Dawn, who's our first session leader on the Creating Performance course.
Oh, great.
It's a, well, many things, lecturer and curator based in Cologne.
Brilliant.
Barry, you saw it.
I really enjoyed it. I was, I might have looked a bit rude because I was texting during it, but I was texting my friend who's the editor of Time Out
Jamie was
to say, like,
that's really
this is really
to say.
But you were laughing a lot also.
Yeah, it was very funny, but I was.
No, your laughter was brilliant. Actually, it kept me going.
I won't get that the rest of the show. I can do it for you.
There was
Really forced laughter would be brilliant.
I love people when they're laughing out loud.
I asked him for his. He said something obligatory and defensive about how much our circulation has gone up when we get to the free Time Out. Also, some of those adverts are a proper fucker to lay out. That's Time Out's official position on it. He's there, so the ad people give him the layouts already in place, and he has to fit his listings around it.
Yeah, sure. So and the people love it, but then the editorial has to go around.
Has to go around and deal with these complicated looking advertisements. But yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting. Have you read? There's a very interesting book called Stage Fright, Animals and Other Theatrical Problems by Nicholas Ridout, which deals in similar areas. I mean, it seemed to me that you were interested in all the things that transformed the simple act of the material of performance into the kind of construction of theatre, the apparatus, the kind of architecture that exists around the basic performance, and the sort of the capitalist architecture implicit in transforming this thing into theatre. But that's what Nicholas Ridout, R-I-D-O-U-T, and what he does is identify the fact that these things that people assume are kind of notorious theatrical problems, like never work with animals, or getting stage fright, or the applause. You've got a wonderful bit about the applause at the end of the show. But for him, they're all about, those are the kind of fissures where the sort of the neatness of this kind of combination of theatre and commerce kind of falls into a hole. So that he talks about stage fright as being about the kind of horrible confusion of the relationship between a performer and an audience at that particular moment. The fact that, you know, they fundamentally paid for you to be there, but that there's a kind of cognitive dissonance in what that relationship is, and it's interesting. And so he talks. I mean, the applause. He talks about the applause being the audience's attempt to try and to try and obliterate the sense in which what they've experienced was just an economic transaction. Right. That by demonstrating their gratefulness for the gift that they've received, they can attempt to almost fool themselves into thinking that they didn't pay for it in the first place. It's nice, it's really interesting.
So we keep an eye on the time. Can you guys, because we need to make sure we see Edwin, which is really soon now.
Which is at 1.
Yeah,
20 minutes.
So we've got like, maybe 20 minutes. So maybe when it gets to 5 to 2, do the thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Ready, James?
Sure.
I guess I was going to speak to Cameron. Speak to everybody. Do that. Hello everyone. Welcome to Armafini. We're here at the 4 days. Excuse me. That's just a term. That was you, wasn't it, Barry? Because we have the same thing.
And it's a very nice sound, by the way.
Yeah, it is a nice sound. We share the same. Okay, are you off now? Are you off?
camera.
I'm on vibrate.
Hi everybody, welcome to 4 Days. This is Arnold Feeney's irregular performance festival. Across 4 days we think through the relations between artist, performer and audience in a number of different formats. And one of the formats that we're looking at today is well, I guess the notional idea of a stage made from not bricks and mortar but contained within the pages of the book. And with me is Andy Field, who's the founder of, or co-founder of Forest Fringe, and associate artist and producer here at Arnold Feeney, and one of the mainstays behind Paper Stages, behind, this is the second edition of the book, and so we're going to sort of talk about that with you. Maybe you just want to say a little bit about Forest Fringe, perhaps, and the sort of genesis of this book. And
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Forest Fringe is an organisation that I run with. I didn't actually found. Debbie founded. So I always say, always gets me in trouble when I don't correct that. My friend Debbie founded, and the two of them, Debbie Pearson, another artist, another performance maker, and that we've been running together since 2008. And what it sort of, the best description of it is that basically it's a sort of extended community of sort of very diverse but somewhat like-minded performance-based artists who come together in certain contexts and certain places, in particular at the Edinburgh Festival, to kind of put on a show, make a festival happen. And it's always sort of emphasised this kind of collaborative approach, I suppose. And we've been making a programme of events at the Edinburgh Festival since 2007, which is now quite a while ago. And sort of as the profile of Forest Fringe and the profile of the kind of this community of artists has grown, so we've begun to do other things in other places as well, in the UK and internationally. In 2000, in Edinburgh we were always in the same home, a wonderful old church above a vegetarian cafe that was kind of appropriately rough and ready venue for this kind of somewhat disparate gathering of artists. And until 2011, when we lost that venue, and whilst we were in the process of finding a new bricks and mortar home in Edinburgh, in 2012 we thought it would be interesting to host a very different kind of festival that nonetheless operated on the same basis, that kind of we would create something collaboratively that meant that was more than merely the sum of its parts, I suppose. And we had the idea to create a book of, I suppose, performances, in which every artist would get a double page in order to create something that was in some way performed. That might mean, and we tried to keep that as open as possible in the way that we talk to the artist about it. That we, that it might be that what the page provides is the construction, is the material to construct a performance, by which it might be a script or a set of specific instructions, or it might be that what you get on the page is an invitation to consider the performance within the everyday in some way. So it's actually, performance becomes simply the act of looking, or a transformation of your act of looking in that kind of cagey sense. Or it might be that perhaps the words or the material on the page itself performs in some way. This was the idea, that the artists could take this sort of very light touch invitation in whatever way they want. And I mean, it's not a particularly new idea, so it's sort of mentioned John Cage and going all the way back to kind of Fluxus and things like that. I've been, in my own practice, quite influenced by. But I think what's interesting is that a lot of the artists around Forest Fringe come more explicitly from a theatre background, and that perhaps in theatre we're not as conscious of the sort of this history that's in our DNA that comes from comes from a whole different set of practices based around, event schools and happenings and various gallery-based performance activity or indeed sort of city-based performance activity. So yeah, so we thought we'd make this book. We thought that might be interesting for Edinburgh. It might be an interesting sort of and gently subversive challenge to the kind of economic circumstances of the Edinburgh Festival, and also to people's consideration of what constitutes a performance within a place like Edinburgh, where you have these kind of 60-minute long black box performances that feel very kind of object-like and commodified, and that perhaps this would be something more slippery and elusive and playful that could, sort of navigate its way through that complicated context. And it was really fun, and we had a good time, and all the artists enjoyed themselves. So we thought, well, let's take that same idea and make a UK-wide version, working with different partners in different parts of the country, and everyone seemed excited by that. And each of those partner organisations got the opportunity to choose 2 artists to be involved in it, which was brilliant because it meant that we had a whole range of artists that we, Forest Fringe, have never had the opportunity to meet and work with before, and we have, thanks to our relations with these other organisations. And yeah, and now here it is. It was printed like yesterday, so it's literally just arrived. Arnolfini is its first sort of launch, and then we'll be going on to Fears Festival in Birmingham and Battersea Arts Centre, National Theatre Wales, Northern Stage, and Cambridge Junction.
So it's on tour?
I suppose it's more, it could be on tour, maybe it's sort of, it's emerging in these various places all at the same time. And we're going to try and do specific staggered launches at each one of those venues to give the kind of people there an opportunity to kind of understand what it is that we're trying to do and what this book is. But it will, be kind of consecutive. It will be happening simultaneously. It will be present simultaneously in those various sites.
And I know that, having been to Forest Fringe and experienced the environment there, and also knowing you guys as a sort of not-for-profit organisation, I know the community and by extension kind of audience, and the role of the audience is really important for you guys. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about, well, firstly, how a member of the public or a visitor, should we say, to one of these partner venues gets a copy of Paper Stages, and how perhaps that sort of exchange is something that kind of relates to the ethos of what you guys are doing collectively.
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting. I mean, in Edinburgh, we've always, the venue remains completely free. All the work that happens there, all the performances are free. And in the past, and I think that's interesting. I don't think, it's obviously kind of unsustainable, but deliberately so. It's a kind of willful unsustainability, and a lot of the other work that we do the rest of the year as a community and as individuals it operates on a very different basis. But it feels like there's something quite interesting and again sort of gently subversive about having this completely implausible, irrational act of generosity kind of embedded like a kind of like a hand grenade in the middle of your otherwise pretty well organised and kind of business-founded practice. The same as anyone has to be relatively business-minded to survive these days. So having this act of irrationality, this sort of implausible generosity in the middle of it feels nice and good. And Paper Stages, we wanted to operate on a similar basis. It didn't. I mean, the first thing that you see in this is that it says this is not actually a book. This is a festival disguised as a book, and that sense in which we didn't want it to operate in that kind of the same kind of commodified way that a book normally operates. That you buy the book and then it's yours. You own it. That we like the idea that this actual material object is something a bit kind of slipperier than that. And so we thought, well, we won't charge for it. It won't be something you can buy. But then at the same time, I felt like it was. I felt there's something important in asking people to invest something in the book. It's like that perhaps that will make people keener to actually engage with the pieces inside it and look at them and perform them and get the most out of them. If you've made this kind of initial commitment to it from the get-go, rather than it being handed to you almost apologetically, it's something that you've earned and therefore are going to make the most of. That seemed good. So we thought, well, maybe rather than the book costing a value of a financial amount, that it would cost an hour of your time. So the way that you can get a copy of this book is by giving up an hour of your time to do something, to help somebody or something, and that will be realised in different ways in each of the places that we're going to. So it might mean that in Birmingham, for example, you spend an hour of your time helping at a community garden in the middle of Birmingham, and then you get a copy of the book in return. Here, there's going to be, I think, after 4 days is finished, we'll have a list of various tasks that you could do for an hour, and if you're able to demonstrate that you've done one of those things, then you can have a copy of the book. And it's not going to be too. We don't want to be too rigorously enforcing this, like it's a sort of strong-arming people into a sense of kind of weirdly Cameron-esque community mindedness, right? That seems awful. But that there is something, there's something interesting in just inviting people to make that initial kind of investment in the book. And we've worked a bit with, time bankers before, and the idea of a kind of cashless economy and how there's something interesting in at least. I mean, I have a real problem with getting too kind of highfalutin in these kind of circumstances and making preposterously overblown statements. I'm going to say one anyway, because we're the last generation that remembers when there was anything other than capitalism, right? Even in its kind of ruined, fragmented, kind of dictatorial form, there seems to be something other than that existing, and now there isn't. It's just completely all-consuming. And so, maybe kind of maybe what we're trying to do to a degree is to make enough space in which we can at least begin to kind of imagine the alternatives, I suppose, in the sort of most gentle and non-confrontational terms.
So, we could go off on one now.
Yeah, but let's not.
What I wanted to ask you next actually was that, so to get a copy of the book, there's a sort of active, that you sort of need to do something, basically. Yeah. But also the artists and the sort of texts that feature in the book, a lot of them are, sort of semi-publicational in some instances for the reader to also be active. Again, and perhaps this time actually be part of a performance, even if it's one in which the artist is only present, through instruction.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's some very lovely. I mean, one that's a lot of them are inviting you. In fact, the large majority are inviting you to do something active, to kind of and to. In various interesting ways. I mean, there's that range from something very simple like Antonio Roberts, who is one of the Fears artists, who just asks you to get a camera and choose a location, take a photo of that location, then drop the camera, then pick it up, take another photo, then drop the camera. So it's this kind of process of sort of erosion, and to something that's actually much more theatrical, like there's Annie Rigby from Newcastle from Unfolding Theatres created a small play that you perform yourself in partnership with your washing machine. So I think that all the pieces are in some way an invitation for the the reader to become sort of performer, and actually to become artist, I suppose, in the sense that what the artists are creating here are not artworks as much as they are a kind of instructions for a kind of self-assembly artwork that, in its realization, will belong to the person who has created it. You know, I think there's a really interesting act of implicit generosity in kind of offering up these sort of fragments of a potential performance for the audience to complete themselves, and then it will belong to them. You know, I think that's very nice.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting, isn't there, about suggesting that these performances, or what's contained in this book, are kind of unfinished, and it's the reader that will complete that picture.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the, as I said, the kind of fluxus and the event scores, and there's something really wonderful about looking back at those kind of pieces, you know, like the early George Brecht pieces from the 1960s, or you know, Bruce Malman's Body Pressure or something like that, in that the piece is never completed. You know, it's kind of constantly reiterating itself, constantly open-ended, and that it's always filled with the potential of its kind of future imagined realization by anyone, anywhere. You know, as long as there are still people, there's still the potential for that piece to kind of carry on, and in this way that kind of feels like it's kind of battling against our very limited notions of both time and value, and in a really exciting way, you know. And I think that's what hopefully some of these pieces are doing as well, is that the piece is constantly sort of fragmenting, like the universe itself. It's constantly expanding outwards and moving in all these different possible directions, that, you know, so that, you know, and many years from now someone could find a copy of this in an attic that they'd kind of lodged somewhere and perform it, and that piece still therefore kind of exists somewhere else again. It's completely, it's sort of without edges, I suppose. That's nice. I think that's nice.
I've got a few quotes that I just thought I just got some stuff depending on where this conversation was going to go. I thought that we could just because I think, you know, for me, and one of the things that 4 Days explores is sort of this idea of the relationship with the audience, and a big influence on me is the British playwright Howard Barker.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I'm not sure if you're a fan, but
I wrote my undergraduate thesis on Howard Barker.
There you go, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. But I think I just sort of do a quick quote from Howard Barker, which says, "A theatre which honours its audience will not make an icon of clarity. A theatre which honours its audience permits them to be left hungry, because theatre is not providing the lunch. A theatre which honours its audience will demand of its writers that they write hazard of their consciences, for writers are the explorers of the imagination, and the audience expects it of them." So, tangential, but you know, I think this kind of idea of the kind of active, this a very kind of active role, and this idea that, you know, perhaps this is being written, and but that again, this kind of really, you know, asking everyone to sort of come together. There's this kind of meeting point, if you will, between what's contained here and what's going to happen thereafter.
Yeah. I suppose that's interesting. I mean, the one thing I think about it is that it's sort of, I suppose the danger with something like this is that it's kind of fragmenting that act of gathering that's implicit in the audience, and that if everyone's going off and making their own sort of theatre festival in their own imagination, that you lose that act of gathering that seems like is at the heart of any potential radicality that theatre might have. But I think that what you've just said about this kind of the sense in which that anyone who has a copy is kind of implicitly a part of this sort of a wider audience, a wider community, is really nice. That, you know, it kind of can connect people up in different places and potentially in different times as well. And and also I think that we want to see, I mean it's an experiment, we don't know, but we want to see how willing and interested people are in trying to kind of connect up via the internet. You know, so we've built a website for the project that allows people to upload any kind of thoughts or documentation of their experience of making this little festival happen, wherever they might be, and hopefully that might be a way in which that sort of that sense of community, that sense of gathering, can exist even whilst people are making their own versions of this festival in various parts of the country.
And is there a hashtag?
There is. There's always a hashtag. It's hashtag paper stages. So there is one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to show this again. Come and get a copy, but you have to do something to get it. So, and thank you, Andy, very much.
No, thank you.
And I look forward to doing some of this myself.
Yeah, do it.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Cheers.